Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun Christmas scroll saw project video, we're going to be cutting out a couple of compound cut Christmas ornaments for the Christmas tree. So really cool, and another creative project to show how you can take projects into the third dimension with a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort over at the scroll saw. Really neat. I've already got the patterns photocopied to their full size, and they're laying on the table saw in front of me. And the design comes from the newest issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing. This is issue 101, winter 2025 to be precise, and you already see a visual representation of what we're going to be making in today's video. Again, we're going to be making two ornaments in today's video, and the design and article begins on page 13, very early in the magazine. It says, icicle and snowman ornaments. Subtle paint and a patient hand yield compound cut decorations with a geometric flair by Miss Diana Thompson, and the ones cut visually for the magazine were cut by Mr. Rolfe. So thank you guys for the beautiful representation of the finished designs here. You have a nice silver icicle here, and it's got some geometric squares. It kind of looks like 8-bit retro gaming, you know, with the sharp corners there on it. So a really cool design there for the icicle. And then you have the snowman itself. You have the 3 circles that make up the snowman's head, body, and base, and then he has a nice little Santa hat keeping his head warm during those cool winter and Christmas months. And then on the following page, on page 14, you have the full-size patterns that you need to photocopy, and as I said, we've already got them photocopied to their full size, and here they are. So you can see that they're not going to take up much material, so you could easily batch these out from scrap pieces of 2x4s lying around your workshop, pieces of pine if you wanted to mill that up for a much easier cut over at the scroll saw, with pine being a softer material. But here is the full-size patterns. We need to get our material prepped, and the material we're going to be using in today's video was given to me by my buddy Sam at Knighthood Creations, and to my knowledge I have never cut this material over at the scroll saw, and it is basswood. We went to his workshop about an hour and change away from home, and he gave me this piece of basswood. It's got some nice clear grain texture in it. You can see it's very rough cut. We're going to cut it to its final dimensions over on the Rikon table saw so we can get our patterns attached, so we can get ready to start making sawdust over at the scroll saw. And since I do so much compound cutting out here in the workshop, I have these little setup blocks already pre-cut to where I can quickly dial the table saw in on the fly if I need to batch out some blanks. I've also got a blank made to the size of the custom compound cut keychains I make. So I'm very eager to try to cut basswood over at the scroll saw. I know it's a softer material like pine, so I'm eager to see how it will react over at the scroll saw, if that makes any sense. But here you can see I've got Rikon table saw marked on it because I've had other table saws out here in the workshop, if you guys know and have been following a long time. And I've got it marked to compound cut word set up for the compound cut nameplates. But this is also the same size for the compound cut ornaments. As you can see there, it is the exact same size, around 1.5 inches square all the way around. And with compound cutting, I hope it goes without saying that you need to make sure that your table saw, your bandsaw, your scroll saw, all the tools that you're going to be doing some form of cut on need to be dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. And if you guys remember, one Christmas season, we made this compound cut Christmas present ornament, and with the miniature nature of it, as I said in the video, you could use, of course, a compound cutting jig, and you can easily tell how this is used. You would sandwich your piece of material once it is prepped between the 2 pieces of wood here, and you would tighten down the wing nuts there on the threaded rods, and it would give you more surface area to grip to over at the scroll saw, so your fingers would not have to be so close to the blade. I am confident in my scrolling abilities over at the scroll saw, but if you are new to scroll saw woodworking, by all means make you a compound cutting jig. They are very easy to make, but I feel confident in holding these pieces since they are a little bit longer. You know, they're not small like that little Christmas present I just showed you. But what we need to do now to get started making this couple of compound cut Christmas ornaments is move the camera and get the Rikon table saw set up so we can mill the basswood down to the appropriate dimensions so we can get the patterns attached and get over to the scroll saw to start making some holiday sawdust. And over here on the Rikon table saw, we're going to begin milling down our basswood to the appropriate dimensions, being as safe as possible. And I'm going to use my setup block there to lock in the rip vents. and we're going to continue ripping down our material to the appropriate dimensions. And again, as I said at the beginning of the video, to my knowledge, I have never scrolled basswood, but I do know it's used for carving purposes, so I was very eager to see how it would react to cutting, and especially compound cutting, over at the scroll saw. But when our blanks are milled down here, we will step over to the workbench and we will begin prepping the patterns here, folding them crisply and precisely along the dotted line, and then attaching them to two sides of our material. And they are, of course, oversized. We will cut them down to smaller pieces once the patterns are fully attached with clear packing tape. And clear packing tape is all I'll use to hold the patterns on during the scrolling process. But over here at the Delta band saw, I'll cut the pieces down to their final dimensions for scrolling, and then I'll head over to the Craftsman drill press and drill the pilot holes for internal cutting. There's not very many on these two ornaments, but there is still enough internal cuts to give the project some beautiful detail once they are fully cut out. After all of the drilling is done here, over at the Rikon scroll saw, I'll quickly double check to make sure it's dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees with my 3D printed blade alignment jigs here. And I'll put the dust mask on. I'll thread the blade through one of the pilot holes, and we are ready to begin scrolling. For all of the scrolling on this project, we will be using a number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade, and it will cut through the 1.5 inch thick piece of basswood exceptionally well. But please be aware, due to the thickness of the material, it is a much slower than normal cut. And I will encourage you guys to please take your time and let the blade do the work, because you do not want that blade to warp or bend within the material, and then once the scroll saw process is done, the piece not be able to slide out. Hopefully that makes sense. We are working on the snowman ornaments here. My family has a vast collection of heirloom Christmas ornaments that we have used year after year after year, and I'm going to be happy to add these to that ever-growing collection, because we always seem to pick up a few new ornaments each and every Christmas season. We are now on the close-up view, and we are working on the icicle ornament, and it does have some of those narrow V points, and you guys know how we cut those out by going in one side of the V and backing the scroll saw blade out and going back into the other side, tapering it down to as fine a V point as the pattern calls for. But I really loved the 8-bit Art Deco style of the icicle ornament here. But once both of them are cut out, we will step over to the workbench, and this is a totally optional step that you do not have to do. You can just go right ahead and tape the piece back in to continue scrolling, but I like to get as much of that excess sawdust off as possible, because it can catch and grab with the friction of the saw blade and make burn marks on the piece you are cutting out. But we will tape the pieces back into place, and I'll poke holes through the tape where the scroll saw blade has to go for the internal cuts, and we'll go over to the scroll saw for the final time. And again, anytime you do compound cutting and you remove material from one side of the material and you go to the other side, the feed rate is going to change drastically, because the scroll saw blade will be floating through what is ultimately negative space and open air, so you won't be cutting as much material. You can see the scroll saw blade there kind of in between those two pieces, so the feed rate just again changes drastically. So I always encourage people to keep a firm and tight grasp on the piece during the whole scroll saw process. But now we are releasing the icicle ornament here. If you guys like what you're seeing, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. I'd really appreciate the support. And thank you Fox Chapel Publishing and Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazines for 2 beautiful compound cut ornaments. When we get the snowman cut out here, all of the scroll saw work will be complete. And then we will head over to the workbench. And these ornaments are very fragile. I hope that goes without saying, so I'm going to be very careful when removing them from the waste material here. And the snowman did get stuck, right at the top of the Santa hat. So I quickly stepped over to the bandsaw and just cut a line down to the top of it to where I could pop it out of the waste wood. But now it is time for some finish sanding, and the blades do such a great job that you don't need to really do a lot of sanding, just some touch-up sanding here with a Klingspor Woodworking Shop sanding sponge and these sanding sticks that subscribers have sent me in the past. Thank you guys for those. They're great for getting into all the nooks and crannies. But now we will begin applying splashes of color. In the icicle, we'll paint a metallic silver like featured in the magazine, and we'll hang it outside in the breeze to dry. And I'll shut the door to keep the heat in the workshop. And the actual Santa ornament, we will paint the Santa hat with the traditional white and red colors, and these are basic acrylic craft paints that are readily available pretty much everywhere in craft stores and big box stores. But I am painting it how it was indicated in the magazine, and I didn't show all of the painting process, but after everything was dried, we are finishing the ornaments with a few coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss to give them protection for years to come and to give them a nice glossy appearance. And it will take a while for them to dry, but the heat in the workshop helps accelerate the drying time. And after they are dry to the touch, we will remove them from the hooks and go back to the workbench for the final time, and we will put a nice little decorative ribbon. I just had blue out in the workshop, so that's what I used. And I used the little scissors on my Swiss Army knife here and just cut 2 short links and tied them to complete the ornaments, just in time for the Christmas season, and just in time to have them displayed on the tree in the model train and nostalgia room, which you will see here in a moment. But once again, 2 beautiful and versatile patterns for scroll saw woodworking for the Christmas and holiday season. And here you see the ornaments on the tree. Thank you all for watching. And here we have the completed custom compound cut Christmas ornaments cut out completely from start to finish over at the scroll saw, and they finished up beautifully with some nice seasonal flair for them for the Christmas season that is here, and Christmas Day is fast approaching. Really cool, really happy with how these came out. I want to once again thank Miss Diana Thompson for the beautiful and creative designs for compound cutting over at the scroll saw, and I also want to thank Mr. Rolfe for cutting the ones that are featured visually in the magazine that I'll show you once again as we get ready to close the video. It took me around 45 minutes to scroll everything out completely from start to finish. These are not overly complex designs. They are basically straightforward compound cut designs where you cut out each side. But as I said at the beginning of the video, when you do compound cutting at the scroll saw, you need to make sure all the tools and machines you're going to be sawing on out in your garage or workshop are dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. You guys seen in the time-lapse portion, I double-checked the scroll saw with the 3D printed blade alignment jigs that I have to make sure that the scroll saw was dialed in properly. And I did what I always do over at the scroll saw, and I took my time and I let the blade do the work, and I was as loyal as I could be to the cut line. And we're going to look at each of these designs individually, then we'll look at them a little bit closer together. But the first one we have here is the icicle, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I love how it has that kind of 8-bit retro vibe going on with all of the sharp corners, you know, like retro video games like the old school Nintendos and everything. But really happy with the geometric style of this, and the silver spray paint that I had really took the project to the next level. And as always, we'll talk about versatility of the pattern and different ways to make and create it. But I really think it finished up beautifully. And then the Rust-Oleum clear gloss we added at the end for both of these ornaments really made them pop and stand out. And I added a nice little sky blue decorative ribbon. Now they are ready to be proudly displayed on the Christmas trees for the Christmas season. And then we have the snowman ornament here. And we took some of the basic acrylic craft paints that's readily available at most big box stores and of course hobby stores, and we painted the top here, the Santa hat here, and again I added a nice decorative ribbon after the paint had dried, and we had finished it with a few coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss. But keep in mind, these ornaments here are very, very fragile, and when you cut them out over at the scroll saw, keep in mind you are scrolling out through 1.5 inch thick of material. So as I always say, take your time and let the blade do the work, because I'm going to show you an example here with one of the scroll saw blades. Keep in mind, this thick piece of material is being cut out with that very thin scroll saw blade. In this case, it's a number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade. And you guys seen that after all of the scroll work is done, how you have the negative here, so to speak, the waste wood, and again, they don't take up much material to make. When you are scrolling through one side, of course, it is a very slow and tedious cut that you need to let the blade do the work with. But once you start flipping it over, the blade is going to be floating through what I call negative space there. So you need to be very careful and keep a firm grasp on your piece while over at the scroll saw. That's why I said if you're uncomfortable cutting out those smaller pieces, make yourself a compound cutting jig like my buddy up in New York, my buddy Robert, made for me a few years ago, and I have used it in the past. It gives you more surface area to grip to where you can have full control of the piece. But when you are scrolling through 1.5 inch piece of material, this is a scrap piece of the basswood, be aware that that scroll saw blade can warp and bend if you are too aggressive, and then the puzzle-like feature of it when you need to take it apart would not work properly if the blade is warping and bending within the material. And I hope that makes sense. That's why I'm trying to reiterate and be very clear here to take your time and let the blade do the work. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, this was my very first time, to my knowledge, cutting basswood over at the scroll saw, and it cut very smoothly, very cleanly, just like pine does over at the scroll saw. And by all means, you could use more exotic or hardwoods to cut these compound cut ornaments out of, but just be aware that with harder or denser materials and the thickness of the material, that would be just that much more of a slower cut over at the scroll saw. But all in all, here is all of the scrap wood, the kindling, so to speak, for the winter season here that is going to be from the ornaments. But with a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort, these beautiful and creative three-dimensional ornaments will emerge over at the scroll saw. Now, options and versatility. With compound cutting, there's not many different things you could do. You could shrink these designs down if you really wanted to test your skills over at the scroll saw, or you could make them just a tad bit bigger. You couldn't go up much bigger because of how thick a scroll saw can ultimately cut, but with, again, a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort, you go from this to these beautiful and creative three-dimensional designs. I feel like you could go above and beyond with painting them. Of course, if you cut them out of exotic woods, you might not need to add no additional splashes of paints or stains or anything like that. But the paints really take the projects to the next level. And I had a friend that used to do it. They don't do it no more, sadly, to my knowledge. But they used to do compound cuts, and then they would fill them with resin. So that was a really cool effect and an option to think about, especially if you put some glow-in-the-dark resin into the negative spaces here while you were doing the compound cut and then cut it out. I think that would be a really cool way to do that. You could paint these in black light paints to where they could glow if a black light was thrown on them while they were on a Christmas tree. So really cool options and versatility for these beautiful and unique and fragile items cut out completely from start to finish over at the scroll saw. And I'm really eager to put them on the Christmas trees because I'm sure they're going to be conversation pieces for years to come. Once again, the patterns and designs come from the newest issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing at the time of this video's recording. Winter 2025 issue 101, so there are over 100 issues now, so that's really, really cool. Packed with 30 plus patterns for ornaments and decor, as it said, and you can see there's a visual representation of them that we made today on the cover of the magazine. And the article itself begins on page 13. And thank you once again to Miss Diana, the late Diana Thompson, and to Mr. Rolfe for cutting these beautiful designs. There you see their featured ones, and then there you see the two that we made and brought to life visually in today's video. And then on the following page, there is a little list of materials you may need. It suggests that you use aspen or Baltic birch to cut these out of. Keep in mind, we used basswood that my buddy Sam at Knighthood Creations gave to me to try out here in the workshop, and thank you, Sam, for giving me that piece of basswood to try. It cut really cool. But there you see the full-size patterns that you photocopy, and then once you get them photocopied, you're ready to start making sawdust out in your garage or workshop. But once again, there is the cover of the magazine for those curious if you want to get it and make one of the designs featured here out in your garage or workshop. But that's going to about wrap it up for these custom compound cut Christmas ornaments made completely over at the Scroll Saw. And hopefully along the way from start until now, as we are closing the video, you guys picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way. It's always fun to make these compound cut designs and bring them to life out in the workshop to show how versatile a scroll saw is. But really, really cool. That's going to be about all for this one. Hopefully, if you're new to the channel, you'll click that subscribe button and also follow me across all of my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys real soon.